What do you think are the largest advantages and disadvantages of Chinese cars if they enter the US market?
So the biggest disadvantage would be that you have people that I'm not going to buy anything Chinese.
Another question. I know you and Duke Hill co-founded the Har Motors several years ago, but as far as I know, the company stopped its business recently. The company aims to bring Zotye and Chery to the United States, but failed.
Yes.
So I know generally that there are several reasons for why Chinese cars cannot export it to the US, like the US China political tension, like the US environmental test and the safety test is very hard to pass. But I do not know the exact reason, the detailed reason. Can you tell me a little bit?
Oh, yes. So I didn't found Howard Duke. I went to work for Duke when I left Hyundai. So I was at Hyundai for 26 years. So I was the U.S. Vice President of Sales and Operations at Hyundai. So about a year later, after I left Hyundai, I went to work for Duke. So the first company he was working with was Zotye. And I think what stopped Zotye was Zotye's financial condition. Things where homologation was going well with some of the Zotye models. They had two EVs. I forget, one was called the B21, I think, which was a very stylish EV. But Zotye ran into those financial difficulties. And at
Yes.
that same time, Duke had talked to Chairman Yin at Chery years before. And in the midst of Zotye going down, the chairman called Duke and said he thought his cars were ready for the US. So that all started in the summer of 2019. We bring cars to the National Dealer Association in Las Vegas in February of 2020.
Wow.
But it was right at the start of COVID. So with COVID starting and everything slowing down, a lot of capital in the US dried up. And I think that all of a sudden on the Chery side, Chery became more fearful as well. But I could tell you, the cars would have homologated. If any car that's sold in Europe, you already meet 90 or 95% of US homologation. And in the US, the homologation, the testing is done by the OEM. It's not like in Europe where you have to submit the cars to the governments and the governments test the cars. No, in the US, it's self-certification. So if you hire a company like Bosch to do the OBD2, the onboard diagnostics for gasoline cars, they've done that countless times, right? So we knew the cars would homologate, and we had 176 dealers that were signed up and ready to go. It really was unfortunate because I think Chery would have been selling hundreds of thousands of cars here. Hundreds of thousands.
You mean if there is no COVID-19, which broke up in early 2020, probably
Yes.
you can see a lot of Chery on US
Oh,
streets.
a lot of cars, right? So one of the things that was supposed to happen at this National Automobile Dealers Association meeting in February of 2020, the Chinese Chery executives were supposed to come and talk to dealers. Well, they couldn't. Nobody could travel at that time. The people that came to that meeting in the US drove to that meeting. They didn't fly. So if they would have seen the excitement, I think it would have been a much different story. Yeah.
Gotcha. What are the main obstacles for Chinese autos to pass the US homologation?
So what we saw with the Zotye and the Chery cars, there was nothing that was going to stop. I think you have on the Chinese side, you always have fear, right? And it's fear of the US legal system,
Yes.
fear of product liability issue.
Yes.
Then the third thing was the OEMs sometimes believe that certain suppliers won't agree to sell their parts in the US,
Yes.
right? So, but again, that all comes down to testing. And so Hyundai and Kia face the same problems, but they just power through them. And I think, again, what the Chinese OEMs don't realize is their cars are so much more superior to what Hyundai and Kia had back 20 years ago, right? The cars aren't the problem anymore. I think now it's just that the fear of coming into the US. But James, I can tell you this: I truly believe that once one company does it and it's successful, other companies will want to do it. It's just that nobody wants to be the first, right? Everybody let somebody go first, and we'll learn from their mistakes, right? But you had Hyundai and Kia come into the U.S. What was the third? The third failed. The third was Daewoo, and they failed, right? So the pie, the sales pie, is only so big. So it's only going to allow so many companies to come in because the pie can only be divided up so many ways. So, and that's why we spent 25 days in China talking to various OEMs to see has who has an inkling to want to come to the U.S. And so I can't say any names, but there's interest. There's definite interest, and I think it's just a matter of time until one of the companies says, "Let's do it."
Yeah. I have friends in almost every automaker in China. I know every automaker is so interested going abroad.
Yeah,
They are selling their cars to every country except US, except
yeah,
North America. This is so weird, but at the same time, other industries, companies in other industries are selling tons of products to the US. I
yeah.
I cannot understand why companies in other industries they don't fear anything in the US. They don't fear any legal
No,
issue, any environmental issue. And also, you mentioned the tier one supplier. I know, yes, some tier one supplier in China they fear that their parts go to the USA, but I know as a meantime, so many at least like 20 tier one supplier they went to Mexico to build up their plants there to supply for Tesla Cybertruck, Tesla
yeah,
Model Y there. This
yeah.
is I just cannot understand.
No, I think it's just fear. I think that within the Chinese OEMs, I think you have the people that want to do it, the people that don't want to do it, and then I think you have a big group of executives in the middle that try to play off, is it a good idea or is it a bad idea, and what's best for my career, right? So let me give you a great example. So Hyundai this year, I think, has had 60, 50 some recalls. I think the Santa Fe has had 4 or 5. The Buick Envision is built by SAIC. It got introduced in 2016. Buick Envision through today has only had 4 recalls that entire time. Two of them, two of them were for a label that was not affixed to the car. One was to check a possible brake line that could crack. That was the most serious. In the meantime, Hyundai has recalled 2.75 million cars with engine issues. And yet they're making billions of dollars in the US. So again, it comes to the point one company just has to have the right guidance, right? And have the right plan and be able to get the right people to steer them, right? Because it would be a Chinese company is not going to come to Chicago and sell cars. Just like I am not going to go to Shanghai and sell cars. You have to have the right people. You have to have the right relationship. And I think you have to have a group of people that say, are there always going to be geopolitical issues? Always. It's two superpowers, right? Relations get good, relations get bad, and it ebbs and flows. It's like a big chart, right? So you have to get beyond all that. And with the way the Chinese cars are, the quality that they have. This last trip, we drove a phenomenal number of different vehicles. We probably drove 15 different vehicles. We went to 5 different car plants. I went through one car plant and I had to say to the plant manager, you know, this is the cleanest car plant I've ever been in. But more than that, you don't see any dust. And he said, oh yeah, so look overhead. There's a big air filtration system so that no dirt or dust gets any place. We don't want dirt inside behind the door card in the door. We don't want that. So US companies don't even worry about that. Tesla doesn't worry about that. Tesla's building cars in California in a tent.
Yes.
Right? So I think part of it is but we do hear where an executive would say, oh, our car's not ready. The next generation will be ready. Well, I've heard that now for like 6 or 7 years for multiple generations of cars. It's if you think you're going to go to Europe and you're going to homologate for Europe and the US at the same time. It's save all kinds of money and you'll get much greater volume. Right? And ICE will live here for a long time. So for all the factories that build engines and transmissions, employment for those factory workers could go on for a long time by selling those ICE cars in the US. It's a good situation.
I want to ask you, what do you think are the largest advantages and disadvantages of Chinese cars if they enter the US market?
So the biggest disadvantage would be that you have people that I'm not going to buy anything Chinese. No, right? So, but people buy things Chinese every day. Their iPhones are Chinese. Many computers are Chinese. Solar panels are Chinese. All kinds of things they buy are Chinese. So we did a study, and JD Powers calls this term net consideration. And net consideration is, would you definitely buy or would you definitely consider a specific OEM? So Hyundai and Kia, last I heard, Hyundai sits at about 38% net consideration, right? Means that 62% of Americans would not consider them, okay? And they'll sell 800,000 cars this year. The most recent data we had, that without people knowing anything about the car, the styling, the price, nothing, just that it is made in China. That's net consideration. The net consideration is 17%. So almost half of Hyundai. So if you wanted to kind of extrapolate that data, if Hyundai sold 800,000 cars with about half net consideration, you should be able to sell 350, 400,000 cars, right? And I think what the Chinese OEMs don't get is that any kind of rhetoric, anything they see on the news, anything they see on TikTok or anything like that, it all comes down to the individual's wallet. If I could buy a SUV, a 3-row SUV, and it was 15 to 20% less, I'm going to buy it because that affects me directly, right? Instead of a $600 car payment, I have a $400 car payment. And that's exactly what happened with Hyundai. People moved to the brand because it was a lower monthly payment. And then when you have the warranty in their mind, well, it's a lower priced car. Is it a cheaper car because it's less money? Well, it must not be a cheaper car because they're giving me this big warranty. If it was a bad car, they would go out of business paying to fix the cars all the time. Right? So you have to give that consumer the whole story, right? And we're working very hard on having Chinese OEMs understand that story.
Gotcha. So you think the American customer don't want to buy Chinese car because of brand discrimination, but some Americans they want to try Chinese car because of a good value for money and a better warranty, right?
Yes, that you know what it comes down to how it affects me, right? And if you started a business where like Hyundai that first full year sold 168,000 accents, all because of price. And it was a horrible car. It was a horrible car. We used to tell the salespeople when you had somebody taking a test drive, and if they had to go on a busy street and accelerate, reach over and shut the air conditioning off. So the car would have more acceleration. Yeah, right? So, but people bought those cars. And today, people like them. And they started with bad cars. A Chinese brand would be starting with good cars.
It seems that the big American three automakers are losing their market, not only in the US, but globally in the past 10 years. So what do you think are the main reasons? They are becoming less and less competitive.
Well, I think it's this focus on big trucks because their profits are dominated by the big trucks. I think that they're not putting any emphasis. They've given up on sedans, where there's still a market for sedan. There is, and their SUVs are just getting priced out of the universe. Their prices are just so high. It is unbelievable. I just don't know how anybody affords them. That's a big problem. And then you had GM announce they were going to go by 2030, 100% EV. A couple months ago, they said, no, we're not doing that. We're going to put $2.8 billion into the development of new full-size pickup trucks, right? So they know they have to sell gasoline cars, but their prices keep going up and going up and going up. I just don't know. Again, what are people going to have to buy? They get forced to go into the used car market. Yeah. And and one other point with the price of cars, we always try to make the point to the Chinese OEM that if you look at like a Rivian or a Lucid, they'll say they spend $1 billion to come up with, design, produce, sell, and market a model. If you look at the cost to take a Chinese car and homologate it for the US, a gasoline car is $30 to $40 million. So what it would cost to design a brand new car for the US, you could do it for 4%. of what it would cost somebody like a Lucid or a Rivian or Ford or Hyundai. It's really amazing. And if you did an EV has 10,000 fewer parts. An EV is probably closer to 20 million miles. If you did an ICE car where it had the same engine and transmission in two models, you save $10 to $15 million because you already have the engine and the transmission homologated. So the costs aren't nearly as great. And I've heard this from some Chinese OEMs. It'll cost 500 million RMB to homologate the car. Not true. It's because that OEM treats the engineering department as a separate business entity. And that business entity says everything costs 500 million RMB, and that's a profit center. So before you even put the car into production, the OEM has made a huge profit. And that's just not the way to come into a new market, right? You have to bear some of those costs, but then choose the right team to lead you into the market for success. And I think that's one of the other things Nimble can do. We deal with the biggest automotive law firm in the country. We deal with the biggest law firm that deals with automotive customs, right? So those are the type of people that you have to be able to have contacts with and work with.
Wow.
And we're currently working on bringing a supercar from the UK into the US. We won't be the distributor. We are the consultant group that is telling them how to do it.
Wow. Yeah. So you mean 20 million US dollar for one model, right?
Yes. Well, for one EV, that's all it would take.
For one EV, so when it has a small facelift, will it need another 20 million?
No. Unless that facelift affects like crash test or something like that. No.
Okay. So one generation of car for 20 million US dollar.
Yeah. So you have to look at that 20 million and say 30 or 40 million for an ICE car.
Gotcha.
The only other cost is depends on the suppliers. If the suppliers want the money for their tooling up front.
Gotcha.
That could be 5 million, 10 million. But a big enough OEM is going to say, no, you want my other business, you're going to come up with those parts. And since it takes for EV, it could take 12 to 14 months to homologate. A gasoline car is generally 20 to 24 months to homologate. Since you have that time frame, it gives you time to put in the dealers. It gets you time to get the dealers to visit China and the factories and get the dealers all hyped up about what a good product this is going to be. And it gives them time to build their buildings, do wherever they're going to sell the cars from and do the service. But more importantly, it gives them time to start pre-sales of the car.
Yes, and also build up the brand reputation.
And build up the brand reputation.
Brand
That's
awareness.
Exactly right. That's right. And you know what? Now you do like Tesla. Tesla doesn't advertise on television at all. Tesla really does. Tesla does events. Right? So here you would do TikTok, you would do Pinterest, you would do Facebook, Instagram. That's where you're going to find the people that want to learn about the cars. And it's very easy then to connect with them and get them information and get them hyped up about buying the car.